Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some and or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have OpenSea receives a Wells notice from the SEC because they believe NFTs are securities. Big issue for many people in the NFT market. Number two, block production and Telegram's Ton blockchain experiences continued disruption, not good, whilst the Telegram founder has been arrested. And next, meme coin Phil, connected to the Ethereum Genesis block, hits a $100 million market cap, kind of straight out of launch. That was a pretty outrageous move there. And as always, we've got all the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs, plus some discussion on how creators can leverage their interest to produce more content and how to decide what you should aim at from a business perspective. Love these little focuses on business we do every now and again. So stay tuned for that. Today, Legendary and Sammy are in the co-host seat and we're ready to get into it. But just a reminder, friends, before we do that, that obviously nothing that we say is financial advice because we do not know anything for sure. So please proceed with caution, exercise your own judgment, and maybe even do some of your own research if that is an option available to you, whether or not it's an option available to you. Legendary, it is Thursday, the 29th of August. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm GM doing quite well. I'm in a bit of a challenge with Sammy, trying to catch up on the gang wars in Packbot. Another gang wars challenge, I think this time with 72,000 blast gold that is to be had. And Sammy is leading. He's leading by a massive amount. I think his gang has like 3.5 million points. I have like 600K, so I'm in the 5th place. And
Okay.
I need to catch up at least a bit.
Nothing is good, you know, when the summer's going on, there's maybe a bit less to do just to fire up some friendly competition. Sammy, how do you feel about crushing your good friend Legendary at the moment? You feeling good about that? You feeling bad about it? You feeling like the gap's actually too wide? Would you like it to be closer?
I'll let them get it a little bit closer before I finish him off. But yeah, I think it's a bit of friendly competition. Nothing harmful with that. So yeah, excited to take that gold medal.
So what, you think you're gonna let him kind of edge towards you, maybe slow down, take it easy on him for a little bit before you apply the finishing touches a little bit later? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think this is probably how it's going to go. I think he's going to close the gap. He'll find some like nuanced niche of where he can accumulate points really quickly.
And just so to be clear, this is like a trading competition on Blast, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly. That's correct. So, yeah.
What are you trading?
Meme coins. So there's not much liquidity on them. But we are literally. It is a very dangerous game. If you want to get dumped on, I'm watching all the other trading groups, see which coins they're trading. But if they suddenly buy something and I'm holding it, I think you'll probably see a red candle going down. So that'll be me dumping on them.
Is this the definition of PvP? Like there's literally different leaders in these different gangs in a market where, look, the meme coin market is kind of illiquid anyway. Well, it's actually liquid, but it's obviously a risky market. But you're dealing in an illiquid, risky market where probably you are some of the main buyers around.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these tokens are probably about 50K liquidity. So 50 to 100K market cap. So it can swing pretty viciously on about a 0.1 ETH purchase. So unless you're trading the likes of YOLO or the Blast token, these things swing pretty heavily.
Okay. Legendary, any final words here? What do you think of Sammy's strategy to kind of lure you back into the competition before executing you?
Look, I want him to feel safe. I want him to feel comfortable. I think there's like a 6x in points and nobody can beat him. And I want him to become a bit more complacent, focused on his little illiquid meme coin trades, and then basically catch up last minute.
Okay. So you're gonna.
I've got your wallet tagged, Legendary, so I know when you start making moves, and I know what you're going to be doing.
Right. Well, that's pretty fun, I guess. You know, high risk, high reward. That's the kind of competition you guys are involved in, right there. Other high risk, high reward stuff going on in the market. Let's get to the kind of market update. Let's start with the price action before we get into the headlines. We have, starting with the price action on crypto, we've got Bitcoin that's pretty flat, 59 59.7K, underneath 60K, unfortunately, but that's where we are. ETH was outperforming, now seems to be flat at about 2.5K. Solana down 1%. Maybe that's what ETH outperformance looks like, guys. Don't worry about it. Bitcoin down 0.3%, Solana down 1.3%, ETH up 0.6%. That is the ETH outperformance we've been waiting for. It's all fine. Keep all of your ETH. Don't sell it for anything else. Getting into the headlines, we have a bunch of important news from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Number one, as you said, OpenSea receives a Wells notice from the SEC threatening to sue because they believe NFTs are securities. The CEO said this: by targeting NFTs, the SEC would stifle innovation on an even broader scale. Hundreds of thousands of online artists and creatives are at risk. Many do not have the resources to defend themselves. NFTs are fundamentally creative goods, art, collectibles, video game items, domain names, event tickets, and more. We should not regulate digital art in the same way we regulate collateralized debt obligations. We'll dive into some of the details a bit more in a bit. That's your headline. Number two, block production on Telegram's Ton blockchain experiences continued disruption, but Ton actually recovers a little bit. It's up 5% to $5.60. It obviously had dumped much more than that in the last few days after the founder's arrest. And finally, meme coin Phil, connected to the Ethereum Genesis block, hit $100 million market cap before retraced to $72 million. This was a wallet connected to the Ethereum network's Genesis block, appearing to have launched a meme coin, according to blockchain data sites DexScreener and ETHScan. The token peaked at a market cap of 125 million after launching just yesterday at 8:15 Eastern time. This was reported by the block. Seems like way too fast and a little bit suspicious there, to be honest. But there's a little bit more context we can provide in the details when we dive into that in a little bit. Some notable sales from around the space. CryptoPunk Top Hat selling for 32 ETH. This is the one I'm sharing on the screen. Remember, when watching, we're streaming live on X video and YouTube video as well. This was 32 ETH, and this is actually a trait which usually commanded a very significant premium. Obviously, the floor of CryptoPunk's around 29 ETH now, so not really commanding the premium that it once did. Also, Dimitri Cherniak Ringers selling for 12 ETH and Xcopy Resist selling for 9.55 ETH. Been a bunch of those kind of art sales going through relatively routinely in the last few days and weeks. That's the headlines and the price action. Legendary, do you want to head over to our NFT marketplace partner, Mintify, and tell us what's going on there?
Absolutely, let's do it. It's again a mixed day for NFTs as well. Honestly, I had expected a bit more movement given the main headline and the SEC Wells notice against OpenSea. However, in terms of the Bored Apes floor, we are sitting at a 13.15 ETH, which is an increase of 0.45% over the last 24 hours. Azuki is also up a touch, still under 5 ETH, still at 4.95 ETH, and trying to close into that 5 ETH mark. Pudgies are down a tiny bit, down 1.5% at a 10.43 ETH floor. And Miladys are down again. They were down yesterday, 2.11%. They're down a total of 10% over the last 7 days and currently at a 3.6 ETH floor. And finally, also want to have a look at Cool Cats, given that it's the PFP of the OpenSea CEO, to see if anything has happened there, any support, any extra dumping, but it's basically flat at a 0.28 ETH floor over the last 24 hours. So nothing of interest to report on that collection.
That's pretty cool. As part of the OpenSea security news, we're going to dive into like what it means to receive a Wells notice, all of the reaction to the Wells notice, but we will also reflect a little bit later on the fact that NFTs basically don't care about this. I'm sure at one point in time when you receive this type of notice, when it concerns a whole asset class, you would have thought that there might have been some more action. But actually, interestingly, I didn't think, when I saw this news yesterday, I didn't actually even think to check the charts. That I just assumed that no one would care. And it seems like we're at that place now. It's not necessarily about NFTs themselves. It's about SEC notices, where it seems like if you receive one, no one cares anymore because they just keep losing. So we'll dive into more of that in just a little bit. Sam, I want to check in with you first. Is there anything in the NFT market that's catching your eye or anything else?
Yeah, so I think yesterday we saw so NFT Stats Collection, the photography one, received an allocation of Blast Gold via Blaster, which was quite interesting. And I think that just kind of made me realize that there are assets that you can hold, whether it's on Blast, whether it's on other chains, that actually receive a kind of like a yield. So I'm starting to view some of these assets as having like a component to them. And I know we've seen comparisons to like if you look back to 2021 when you had cybercongs and you had the banana token, that was effectively a yield. And then there were some other derivatives that came after that. But I think that to me is quite interesting, especially in light of this whole SEC stuff. Like, can that be construed as like a expectation of future profits? If you hold an NFT, does that meet the Howey test or not? So it's just interesting to me, and that's just an observation that I've made. And it'd be interesting to see how this case develops and which NFT collections are actually caught by it.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it makes sense actually to just dive straight into it because we're here. Let's set it up with what it actually means, or what the news was, what the reaction was, what it means to kind of to get this piece of news. I'm going to share my screen for the people who are watching in. Obviously, this SEC Wells notice targets NFTs on OpenSea. The CEO Devin Finzer said they're ready to stand up and fight. He said, by targeting NFTs, the SEC would stifle innovation on an even broader scale. Hundreds of thousands of online artists and creatives are at risk. Many do not have the resources to defend themselves. A Wells notice, however, doesn't mean that the SEC will file a complaint against the company, but it discloses an investigation into the firm. That's maybe one of the key distinctions, although it's pretty reasonable to suggest that, you know, they are starting the investigation, disclosing the investigation because they have some reason to consider acting. Just to place this in context, Blockworks reported that the SEC has targeted a handful of crypto companies with Wells notices this year, including Uniswap, Consensus, and Robinhood. So all the main players. It almost feels that at this point, if you haven't been included, maybe you're doing something wrong, frankly, because these are some good companies. Some people are doing a decent job at providing digital asset tooling. And if you're not getting a Wells notice, I'm not sure if you're doing anything right at the moment. A bit more context, though, on the kind of CEO's thoughts on this. He said, NFTs are fundamentally creative goods. We should not regulate digital art in the same way we regulate collateralized debt obligations. By targeting NFTs, the SEC is diving into new, uncharted waters with potentially harmful consequences for consumers, creators, and entrepreneurs alike. What they did say in additional news, they said OpenSea will also pledge $5 million to help cover legal fees for NFT creators and devs that receive a Wells notice. Interestingly, there was actually a lawsuit already filed against the SEC from two other NFT creators, Jonathan Mann and Brian Fryer. And the reason why they did this, got this other article here. It was an interesting story. It's one of the guys who produces, I think it's the guy who produces the song Every Day, A Song a Day Man. I don't know if you've seen that guy on crypto Twitter. And basically you're saying like, look, I looked at what happened with Stoner Cats. And this is the quote. I looked at what happened with Stoner Cats and I was just like, they didn't do much different to what everyone else is doing. And if there is something wrong, I need to know about it now. So I'm going to bring this action because, you know, we need clarity over the things that we're doing. And I actually did think that at the time, although everyone kind of criticized Stoner Cats for their, how do you describe it? People called Stoner Cats a cash grab. And therefore, when they got fined, people didn't really seem to care because it was like rich celebrities. Remember, it was Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis. And because it was like these famous people coming in, taking a lot of money, people didn't really care that they got fined, I felt. But if you actually think about it practically, it's like, well, no, if they get fined and these were the parameters of how they got fined, then that can just be applied to you in a different context. So you should be way more concerned why they got fined rather than the fact they did a cash grab, they didn't really produce as much as they thought, they used this particular language, because chances are a number of other collections also use that type of language, and you'll get caught in the same crossfires if that law is applied equally, which it might be eventually. So I guess that's some of the additional context, but would love to go to Legendary first. I know we've got some audio issues, so maybe we'll just check you're okay. And then Sam, want to hear your thoughts, and Funky's got his hand raised too.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry for the audio issues. Apparently, my mic unmuted itself, and people in spaces could hear me twice. But I hope that should be fixed now.
Yep.
And in terms of the news, again, you said it perfectly right. With okay, Tira is saying in the comments, I'm relieved. Mike is good. You said perfectly right. Stoner Cats was that example. Actually, even had Vitalik as one of the characters that he was speaking for the series. You should be concerned about like the reasoning, the language, and why they've been fined. And this is kind of happening with OpenSea now. I think that's the reason we see all of that solidarity on the timeline, and people standing behind OpenSea, and Whale posting his GM with a shield and the OpenSea logo on it, because this is such a broad product and obviously like synonymous for the NFT asset, that people now this time really start to think, oh, if this marketplace is actually sued and eventually or potentially fined, does this affect me as a collector? Does this affect me as an artist, as a project? So it's definitely a very interesting case to watch. Timing wise, it's also fun. Yesterday, we've been speaking about Trump launching his biggest NFT collection ever. And that's the news the day after. That's also an interesting coincidence, call it like that, to observe.
Interesting angle. I didn't really think of that. To the extent that some people, I guess, reading into your assumption or reading into your line of thinking might be that to the extent that this stuff is being weaponized by like one party over another, it's quite funny that the Republican presidential candidate literally just launched the NFTs yesterday. I hadn't really thought about that. Sammy, what's your thoughts on this? Legendary mentioned the kind of solidarity on the timeline. I'd kind of joked this is one of the only things that could happen to OpenSea to make people like them again. What are your thoughts? I think it's What are you thinking here?
Well, I think it's, I mean, using the broad brush of saying that NFTs are securities in one big sweeping thing is completely like, it's just not going to happen. I think you've got subsegments of what NFTs are anyway. And kind of, if you look at like, I don't know, ticketing, loyalty reward programs, you've got PFP NFTs, you've got all these different like pillars of what they could be. And I think if they do go down this route and they dig into it, I think they'll probably end up having to categorize them a bit more clearly. And I guess that leads to that regulatory clarity that we're looking for as well, because ultimately this is how the industry progresses. And actually, when you have that regulatory clarity, companies that don't necessarily integrate NFTs will start integrating those that are permissible or are not categorized as securities. And there will be NFTs as securities. Like you look at I use the example of Uniswap LPs and things like that have those dynamic NFTs that change based on whatever's in the LP. Like that, you could effectively have certain stocks, bonds, like actual financial instruments that are securities put on chain as NFTs in a way. And that is a security. So I think I think we're still in that primitive stage where we're trying to work out, okay, well, what's the regulator trying to say here? For me, this is progress. I don't think that all NFTs are going to be categorized as securities, especially not collectibles. Like using the example of Pokemon cards, and I think Gary Gensler has said that explicitly, that Pokemon cards are securities, the tokenized ones, which just doesn't make sense. So I think there are just like a number of things that have to be defined, clarified for this to kind of progress. And to me, it's bullish. I think I made a post yesterday around the cost that this is going to potentially cost. Coinbase, like they had an increase in legal fees for 1 year of about 33 million. Now OpenSea doesn't really have that kind of clout. Like I think they recognized about 400 and something million in revenue at their height. So when they had like significant volume, trading fees, all this kind of stuff, but that's down 80%. So if you assume revenue's down by that same amount, you're looking at probably like 100 million turnover, all those operating costs get deducted from that. There's no way they're going to be able to afford a 33 million increase in legal fees just to try and fight this case. So I think there's a number of things that probably like question, like, are they the right company to fight this fight, or will they need support from the likes of Coinbase or these bigger fish?
I very much like the point, which may be obvious to people, but just the fact that how you made the point clearly, some NFTs might be securities, to be completely honest with you, because the NFTs are a technology and it depends on how you use it and how you market it. That's what makes something the security or not. And there will be NFTs that should clearly not be securities, especially when they take on the characteristics of the pure collectible, which exist in the traditional world already. But as you say, there might be some which were marketed in such an aggressive investment, with such an aggressive investment angle, that maybe they do become that. Just pointing out, Mario Longton in the comments said that Stoner Cats was hyped, pumped, and manipulated by various influence and market makers. I think, just trying to draw a distinction between maybe one that was more aggressively marketed versus maybe the others. And I think that's maybe Sam's point, which is, an artist creating some art and asking people if they want to buy it is very different to a project or team marketing it very aggressively as an investment opportunity. Look, I don't know. It's hard where you draw the line, because I do know some artists who also market the stuff very aggressively. So where is the line there? I think this stuff will have to be kind of teased out, and people will have to have that difficult conversation of, well, what are people doing in the trad art world? What are people doing in the collectibles industry when it comes to selling this stuff? Because if it's very, very similar, then it would be hard to say that this is much worse or much more dangerous. Although, as you say, like, I completely admit there was some wild promises being made in this space at various points in time. So,
but I think that's the point as well. Like, if you remember from 2021, following the Cyberkongs banana token being attributed to that, I think there was like a raft of different smaller projects that launched. Then were like promising a token, and then that kind of like gets into the realms of like an income that's attached to that asset, and then it's like, okay, well, you're going to make profits from that. And then it becomes that bit of a gray area. Like, is this actually a security? And I had like NFTs that were literally turtles that would earn turtle yield. And I'm like, that's delisted by OpenSea because it clearly like contradicts like the regulations. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they dig up, because there's some pretty raunchy stuff from 2021.
How much turtle yield did you make in the end? Do you remember?
Literally nothing, because it got banned from OpenSea. There was no blur at the time, so we couldn't really trade it anywhere. Okay. So the NFT went to zero, and therefore the yield was pretty much zero as well.
Damn it. Well, it can't be a security then, because you make because well, actually no, it can, because it's about the expectation of profit rather than whether you make any or not. So unfortunately, I saw that argument being made on the timeline yesterday. So some people saying, well, no one made any profit, so it can't be a security. It's like, no, it's not about whether you make it or not. It's about whether you expected to because of the marketing of it. Look, we got a couple of hands here. I know people have some big thoughts on this. Funkies and Matthew have their hands raised. Let's go to Funky first. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on the OpenSea news? Welcome to the stage.
GM gang, a couple things. One, I think I already saw that they pledged $5 million OpenSea toward the defense of this case. And I loved your take on the NGMI energy. If you didn't get a Wells notice, you must be sucking at crypto. But this was really timely because yesterday, as part of my side hustle as the ARC Education Blockchain Liaison, like, I was at the Blockchain Association monthly Marcoms meeting. Mm-hmm. This is the largest trade association in the US, deals with everybody at the federal level. And we talked a lot about this. We also discussed the fact that this was right on the heels of the Trump NFT launch, as you pointed out. And but then the irony of the fact, and I did not know this, somebody in the meeting brought up the fact that the DNC somehow used NFTs to raise funds in the US for political campaigns. So it's kind of ironic that you'd have that kind of stance, and just, I mean, the timing, to your point, could be just a coincidence, right? Correlation is not causation. Sure. But it really is quite interesting that all this is happening. And then also on the heels of this, because we're not really mainstream media followers, in the last few days, there's been a huge attack on the industry, on all the major mainstream media. Washington Post, New York Times, they all had very aggressive op-eds. They're taking particular issue with the PACs that are coming. So I think we're just seeing sort of like this fomenting of the election season coming, and the fact that the media kind of looks at this as a one-sided issue, and it's very partisan, which we know, those of us who are in the space, blockchain, of course, is nonpartisan. So I just wanted to chime in a little bit as the official U.S. political correspondent.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate that kind of additional context. It's interesting to hear. I had some more thoughts. Maybe I'll come back to it because I just forgotten. But Matthew's hand is raised. Matthew, welcome to the stage, my friend. Well, what's your thinking here?
Good morning, everybody. Happy birthday, Funky. Just want to give a quick shout out. I think it's his birthday today.
Shout out, Funky. Happy birthday, man.
Yeah, I think just as somebody who like focuses on the security aspect of, you know, what constitutes security versus not, you know, one of the things that they're looking at specifically here is not necessarily NFTs, but OpenSea as a marketplace that facilitated the buying and selling of investment vehicles. And it's not necessarily, you know, if you've got an NFT that might be considered a security, they're not coming after you. It might be worthless because nobody's going to want to buy it after this. But this is not really, sure, it's a shot across the bow at NFTs, but it's really a shot across the bow at facilitating these transactions and perpetuating investment vehicles for the better part of 18 months in sort of the season of 2020, 2021. And that's really, in my mind, what they're going after. It's not so much specific projects, but the fact that this company proliferated all these different and supported all these different investment vehicles, quote unquote investment vehicles, for a long time, for 18 months.
I think that's a reasonable point. And I think that actually makes more sense, right? Because that would, I mean, to the extent that it makes sense, it would make more sense if you're going after the marketplace, which is for allowing both legal and illegal stuff. So maybe written into this somewhere, there is an appreciation that, you know, fine, some assets are completely fine, whereas there are some that are not. And for the ones that are not, there would be probably some obligation in the same way that if in any shop, if there are certain products which do not meet the requirements or the standard regulatory requirements for like that particular category, that shop shouldn't be stocking it. And so, you know, yes, you can get annoyed at the producer, but there's also an obligation on the seller as well. So maybe that's the framing.
Like, it's like they're a broker dealer without having a broker dealer license, basically.
Correct. There's always a damn license for everything. That's
why I'm a registered investment advisor.
Someone asked me if I had a license for something. I think I was doing some I was just putting someone in touch with someone else, and they asked me if I was a broker. I was like, no, I'm not a broker. I don't have a license. That like I need a license to give you someone else's details. Like, what's going on here? But no, I completely take your point, Matthew. Appreciate that perspective. Legendary, I think you sounded like you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to shout out Tom in the YouTube comments saying, my guess is that the founders of OpenSea must be tempted to sell the company ASAP. Feels like they decided to not launch a token to avoid a situation like this. Not sure if they really want the battle. Other commenters on X under the post by the OpenSea CEO have also been saying something similar, that they should have launched a token. SEC is coming after them either way. And to Matthew's point, you know, if they're going for the broker without a license, then the question really becomes, how far does the broker's responsibility go in terms of the collections that they have to look at to determine, are they securities or aren't they? And they have delisted some of the collections that were pretty obviously a security. And the question then becomes, can they like actually showcase that they did undertake a reasonable effort to filter the content on the platform, or wasn't that effort enough?
That's a great point. Do you know what? I was actually advising, I mean, not formally, I was having an informal conversation with a team of gold miners the other day. And they're like, they've got some licenses. I won't say where specifically, but the question, they were trying to explore how they might go about selling either NFTs or digital assets as part of their funding in order to kind of take a stake in this gold mining company. And one of, you know, I gave a variety of different thoughts, but like one of those aspects, which I explained pretty clearly from a legal perspective, I think, is, look, you can do the raise, you can do it if you want, but because of the security like nature of your thing, you can't let this trade freely. Like, this is on you. You can't let this trade freely because you're just not allowed to do that for those types of offerings. And so if you wanted to do this, you would need to build, unless there exists already, you'd need to build the closed marketplace where every person is KYC'd, where every person, as those things trade hands, everyone is always completely aware of who is holding the shares. That's what you'd have to do. You can't let these things kind of trade freely. And maybe I think that's one of the really important parts of this. I think. Sam, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the gold mining industry, for a start, is so concerning because I think there's like so many mines that are effectively empty. There's no gold and it just gets sold off, or there's like political, regulatory risks. So it's a completely different ballgame. But that aside, yeah, I mean, like in the UK, you have like registered individuals that if you meet certain criteria as an investor, you can trade these securities. Yeah, I think the KYC stuff, like when I was at EY, like the due diligence that we would have to do, we'd have like literal processes that we'd have to follow. If we didn't follow those processes and we were investigated, then like we would be screwed. But if we follow those processes and those are approved by the regulators as being reasonable and consistent with the law, then there's not much that they can do. And I think that comes down to the likes of OpenSea or all these other ones. If they are effectively issuing certain assets that could be construed as securities, are there processes and systems in place sufficient to meet those requirements? And I guess that's what we'll find out.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense. Honestly, from the business perspective, though, you mentioned the gold mining industry. It was like fascinating, although it was just one conversation, a couple of conversations I had with them. It was like really interesting to find out like how it works. Because as you said, there's like political stuff, there's security stuff. They were like, how do you get the gold? Like how do you get it? And I was like, would there be a possibility for investors to get paid in gold? And they were like, yeah, why not? It's like that would be fun. I would like.
It'll be fun, but I think it just depends on where those mines are, and also the modern slavery and all this kind of stuff that's associated with it. I think there's just a whole raft of, I think you've frozen, but I think there's a whole raft of like other potential liabilities that I'd be concerned about with that industry. It's the same with like the diamond mines. I think we've lost B. But yeah, I did have a look at it, and I've spoken to various people in that industry, and I wouldn't necessarily want to entertain it. It's a completely different ballgame, and I think you'll probably end up becoming the exit liquidity if you don't know too much about it, and you end up buying or certain shares within like a shell company that doesn't necessarily own the underlying gold mines. So it'd be interesting.
I think it's probably one of the hardest industries to break in because all of that like political weight, existing relationships on top of the regulatory stuff is just not a very easy industry to operate in if you haven't done your lobbying for the last couple of generations. I think this is the reason why the two of us mainly focused on blast gold farming, because that's an easier gold mining, or has been an easier gold mining industry.
Yeah, I think, and just like the digital aspect is just so much easier than taking physical delivery of certain assets. But yeah, I think there's a number of people actually on Twitter that actually are in that industry. And I know JRN, is it JRNE? The jewelers, they come from that. I think Carlitos is from that background as well. And there's a number of other people that I've spoken to about that industry. Super interesting if you have the time. But yeah, we diverge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any sign of B yet? We lost him.
Not yet. And I think for the time where he is gone, we only have sound on YouTube. So we don't have any sound of Spaces in the meantime. So I hope that he will come back in the next couple of minutes so that we can plug into Spaces again.
Got a captive audience.
Let's see what we can do. You can, Sammy, you could unmute yourself in Spaces and quickly give them this update in the meantime.
So we've just lost B, and we are. So I don't know if you can hear me now on X. Someone in the YouTube comments, just make a comment, and then we'll be able to. Yeah. So Sammy on Spaces. Yeah. So we lost B just in the middle of discussing the differences between gold mining industry and the NFT industry. But yeah, ultimately, we're just seeking regulatory account. I wasn't really sure where we got to actually. But if you message,
I think you're co-hosting the Spaces, right?
No, I'm just a speaker.
Oh, so you can't add me as a speaker. Wait, I can join with I'll join with the Modern Market account. Let's do it.
All right. Sorry, guys. If you just bear with us a sec, we've just had some technical difficulties. Legendary is rejoining as the Modern Market account, and then we'll be able to reassign each other as co-host. Husker is saying that X has stopped working as well. So maybe it's a problem with X systemically.
Oh, X is down completely.
Yeah.
But I think now, at least with X, we should be able to have a working people are Legendary is back. I think, Sammy, I'm going to mute you. All right. B, are you back with us?